Greetings, YouTube friends. Today is Friday, March 13th, 2026, and I am very excited to be here with my friend K.M, and we are going to discuss the upcoming new moon. Hey, K.M, welcome.
Thanks for having me again. This is a big one. Excited.
It is. I'm super excited, and I think that we should just jump in and get started talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's screen share. So here is the chart of the new moon, and it is positioned. My charts are always positioned over New York City simply because I do predominantly financial astrology for anyone who's new to the channel. Of course, I'm also a mundane astrologer, but my focus is on financial astrology. So I like to see where the planets are lining up over the New York Stock Exchange. They are lining up just on the inside of the sixth house over New York City. And the sixth house rules labor forces, production, manufacturing, which is interesting. But it's really just very cuspy. And, you know, it kind of depends on what house system you use, right? As to if it might fall just on the inside of the fifth house as well.
Yeah, you know, Margo, I use the whole sign system a lot in my work. And what I find fascinating about this is it puts all that Pisces energy in the fifth house of trading, speculation. And you and I were talking about the inconjunct nature of it to the part of fortune and the part of fortune's inconjunct nature to Uranus. And you had a good point about that creating a yod. I thought that would be helpful to share.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that is fascinating that it's falling in the fifth house in the whole sign. And I remember actually you're the one that taught me an outlook on the whole sign versus the other house systems like equal or placidus. Remind me, you were saying that the whole sign represents, is it the outer? And then, yep.
It's more that I find, and I've done a lot of work in both systems, that the whole sign is great for transits because once the planets enter a new sign, there's a distinct energy that we can measure. Mm-hmm. And so I have found that for transits, it's really great. It's an external representation where I tend to use quadrant-based house systems and also equal sign for when we're doing more internal work or trying to understand what's going on behind the scenes. One of the reasons you've introduced me to the power of equal because it kind of splits the baby, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But look at that yod with Chiron right on the descendant.
Yeah.
You know, and
yeah, absolutely. You know, the yod is a fated aspect pattern. So the way I always look at this is it's like the two legs here, it's the apex can't always see the two legs, right? So I wonder what it is that the markets aren't seeing. It's like the markets actually aren't seeing maybe the favorable nature that's actually kind of there, even though I'm going to say under the surface, even though it's actually on the ascendant, which is more like outwardly facing to the world. But somehow the new moon obscures that. And the new moon being at 28 degrees Pisces also, you know, having a kind of fog to it. And also let's not leave out our good friend Mercury, who is also retrograde in Pisces right now. And this has been an incredibly foggy Mercury retrograde period. I'll speak for myself. One of the most foggy that I've ever experienced, actually.
I think you're speaking for many. And look at that. It's exactly conjunct the North Node, which is not only fate, but at least an amplification point in the sky. So there's something that is pure foggy. And I'm glad that you are now showing all these planets because before the new moon becomes exact, it's going to pass over Mercury, North Node, and Mars. And this new moon happens on Wednesday, if I'm correct. And the weekend before, we have Mercury and Mars making a conjunction that I'm really nervous about, could be amplifying the conflict right now. Everyone's focused on the conflict in Iran. The markets are gyrating from it. And so maybe there is something that is unseen about the markets, like you were saying, because the focus is so heavily on this, you know, increasingly fog of war signature.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. Here, check this out. This is the moment that you were just talking about. I actually hadn't looked at this exact conjunction here, but that Mercury Mars conjunction is going to be at 10 degrees Pisces in the second house over New York City. And
Yeah.
check it out. Here's our part of fortune prominently
Yep.
placed once again,
Yep.
right there in that aspect pattern. And we've been doing these new moon videos now for a few months, and the part of fortune has just been prominently placed in so many of the geocentric exact aspect charts for not only new moon, full moon, but lots of the different aspects. Because in my Discord we do the monthly AMA and webinar, and I go through all of the biggest events that are going on in the month, and I've been noticing this prominent placement of the part of fortune, and Vesta's in there too.
You know what I like too about this? So this is the chart of Mercury Mars. Is look at Jupiter's in the seventh house. Something could happen this weekend. We're recording on Friday the 13th, and something could happen this weekend that perhaps really amplifies sellers on Monday, Tuesday, before a shift on the new moon Wednesday and into the equinox. So that's actually my bias, is that we have a sharp drawdown or at least a volatile week, but that the new moon in the long run leads to coming out of it, that it is a pivot low, if not on exactly that day. And, we love to talk in the Discord a lot. And you've been so helpful to remind people that there's important levels. We know when we're going to be wrong if we're wrong, but that's my bias right now.
I totally agree with you. And, this is a good moment to just mention also that the equinox is on the 20th, and Mercury is going to station direct on the 20th. And the equinox has a very, very strong correlation to major weekly pivots in the US equity markets. So I
Yep.
think the fact that it aligns with this new moon, with this current configuration of the yod, pointing to the apex of the part of fortune, which and I also want to mention the part of fortune is a 2-degree orb from fixed star Spica. And I keep the fixed star Spica on my charts always because it is the fixed star that is most associated with wealth and abundance, actually. And so the fact that
Incredible.
the part of fortune is conjunct Spica on the ascendant over New York City, and remember that I think the thing that I always like to remind viewers is that the new moon chart is setting the tone for the next lunar cycle. It's not just telling us what's going to happen on that day or the days around it. It's giving us kind of a map, if you will, for the next 29-ish day cycle that we're going to, experience. And so that's going to take us into April.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big time in that regard. Did you want to talk a little bit about, we were talking before recording about Jupiter in Cancer. That could be a nice sort of devil's advocate view of our bullish position.
Well, oh yeah, we could talk about that Jupiter in Cancer. Yes.
Yeah.
But before we even talk about that Jupiter in Cancer, I was going to say that the freshly direct, because Jupiter just stationed direct this week. And so
Yeah.
we do have a freshly direct Jupiter that is, and Jupiter at 15 degrees of Cancer is a very poignant position. Actually, back that up. Any planet that sits around or passes over or spends any time around 15 degrees Cancer is a poignant position, particularly for the financial markets, because the New York Stock Exchange ascendant sits at 14 degrees and 7 minutes of
Yeah.
Cancer, right?
Yeah.
And very tight orb to the fixed star Sirius. And the fixed star Sirius is also the brightest star in the sky. And so, when you get activation of that point, historically, we get strong moves in the U.S. equity markets, and that happens when you get Mars over the ascendant, and actually, it happens all the way down the lunar cycle. When you get the moon passing over the ascendant, in a bullish environment, you have a bullish bias to get a strong move up, and in a bearish environment, you get a bias towards a strong move down. So Jupiter is like drilling down on 15 degrees Cancer. It's going to be at 15 degrees Cancer like for another few weeks. So that's a pretty big deal. And yeah, I can go ahead and show the price chart that I whipped up, and I'm going to not go through the in-depth analysis, but I'm going to show just the last few events of Jupiter transiting the sign of 15 degrees Cancer for everybody. And this might make you think I have a bearish bias when I show you this, but I don't necessarily have a long-term bearish, or well, I think in the short term, we're looking for a low, 20-week cycle low and a 40-week cycle low in the U.S. equity markets. So this is the last time we had Jupiter pass over 15 degrees Cancer, and it made 2 passes. Because when it has a retrograde event over these degrees, then we'll get 2 or 3 passes. So the event that took place in September of 2013, notice that the first event led to just a short-term consolidation and continuation. And then the second event gave us about 4 weeks down. And we did recover and chop around sideways for quite a few weeks before a kind of choppy continuation in 2014. If we head back to 2002, this was, of course, during the dot-com crisis. So the first pass took place here. We continued up, chopped around, but that last pass, we saw that down move. That was pretty hefty. And to kind of, without belaboring this too much, what I see consistently as a pattern, here's one. This was a single pass. We had no retrograde during this pass. And you can see that we chopped around, came back up, made a new high, and then had a big move down. And that was in 1990. And I've tracked these all the way back to 1918. So I think we'll stop here. But here was one that was, happened towards the down move on the weekly chart. And then we saw a recovery, but then further choppy action. And so when I'm looking at Jupiter transits, I'm looking at a longer period of time because I have mapped on here Jupiter at 15 degrees Cancer, but Jupiter hangs out at 15 degrees Cancer for anywhere from, a couple weeks to, a couple months in the current case, depending on that retrograde motion. So long story short, there's a heavy correlation to periods of consolidation and down moves. And here we are. This is our current state of affairs here. So our first pass took place here. We had a choppy, a little short consolidation continuation. And then here we are. We've just come straight off the top since just before Jupiter station direct.
And I like that you went back to 2013-14 because this could look like that. Look, we almost have 4 weeks down. I know that there's that one slightly up week. But if the upcoming week is a pivot low, that could be the 4th week down. And I don't think that having a 20 or 40 week low this week or next invalidates the Jupiter in Cancer research you've done. I just think it helps provide context for the idea that this could be a significant pivot low.
I agree with you. And the reason I have a fib run here, for anybody who's maybe not familiar with the financial chart, this is a Fibonacci retracement. And anytime you get a retracement to the 38.2% or 0.382 retracement, that's a bullish retracement if you get a reversal there. If you lose that level, then you look down to the 50%, and that's kind of like the hold the line for the bull zone. So I also noticed another pattern when I went back and tracked these, which is that there's a really strong correlation to Jupiter returning to the same price level it was at when it stationed retrograde or when it made its first pass over that degree. This is a technique that I talk about a lot in my Discord. So this gives us the price target on the Dow of 45,631, and then the 382 sits at 45,202. So that's pretty much the price target I'm looking at. That's about another 3% down from where we are right now.
Which, Margo, with the current sentiment, that could be seen as disastrous, even though it's technically a great level to bounce off of.
It's
this
true.
Current sentiment is so bearish. And that goes back to the new moon chart, if you want to pull it up, where I think not we, but a lot of buyers, because the first house can represent buyers, aren't necessarily seeing clearly with that in conjunct to Uranus and the new moon. And obviously, I'm not saying everything is puppies and flowers right now. It's an incredibly tense moment for the world and balancing that. And, I think it is going to be not looking forward to seeing what happens this weekend, especially with the current administration loves to act when markets are closed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I feel like you and I are providing an alternate view to the idea that there's going to be some sort of mega crash in the next couple of weeks. and instead trying to frame it in the context of how much has already gone down, that we're in the range of a 20 and 40 week low. And I think that's a really reasonable position.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I still think that the most likely scenario, I've been talking about this on a handful of some of my YouTube videos, and I do a Twitter space and in the Discord, that I do think that the most likely scenario is that we, at the very least, will retest all-time highs, if not make new all-time highs into the summer. And then things get dicey from my take outlook after that, because we get Venus retrograde next fall and whatnot. And those can be topics of later videos. But
Yes, can't wait.
at the very least, when we find this 20 and 40 week cycle low, we know, because a cycle is defined, a traditional time cycle is defined low to low. So, just to give the viewers, some of them may be financial market people, some may not be. But we're sitting right at 48 weeks from the low back here on April 7th. And a 40-week cycle low gets plus or minus 7 weeks either side of it to create that, what I call a time band, where you would find the low of the next cycle. And after it puts in the low of the next cycle, then by definition, the first 20% roughly of the next cycle has to be up. There's no guarantee of how up it has to be, but that's what defines the low of the cycle, is that you put a low in and then you get a bounce underway.
Mm-hmm.
So at the very least, we know that we can be looking for that first 20% in the next cycle, and then we just gauge the momentum afterwards. So that's my deep dive on the financial markets.
Yeah, you've been so helpful in sharing that with your Discord and has taught me so much. How do you feel about doing some astro mapping, or did you want to go through the New York Stock Exchange chart
Yeah, I would
first?
love to do some astro mapping. While we're talking about the markets, I can just talk about the New York Stock Exchange chart real quick. I mean, we already covered the fact that Jupiter is drilling down on the ascendant of the New York Stock Exchange right now, or within a degree of it. But this new moon falls in the ninth house over the New York Stock Exchange. The ninth house very reliably rules international trade. So, I'm not surprised to see, the shipping issues, the tariff stuff. I mean, you name it, right? That's all very real. And then, of course, the Strait of Hormuz stuff and the actual shipping stuff, with Pisces also ruling water and shipping, right? And the New York Stock Exchange has its south node sitting just at 2 degrees Aries. That's conjunct the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which we haven't even really talked about that yet. And then the New York Stock Exchange midheaven sits at 23 Pisces. So this new moon falls kind of right in between the midheaven, which is, it's the point in your chart that represents like what you're most seen for. So this is definitely impacting the New York Stock Exchange chart in a big way. And then the part of fortune down here is almost exactly conjunct Neptune being the ruler of Pisces, the traditional ruler of Pisces. So
Incredible.
Yeah, we've got a lot of water, a lot of issues. And then Neptune also is one of the co-rulers of oil, right? And we've seen big moves in oil. And of course, oil then being affected by the shipping and the all the events going on in the waters over in the Middle East. And so this is all very fitting, as it usually is. So we say, you can't make it up.
You can't make it up. That should be the tagline of this podcast.
It totally should be.
Or this YouTube. That's fascinating.
It is. And then the last thing I was just going to show everybody is the Tesla chart. This just jumped out at me when I was doing my research. And this new moon is almost exactly conjunct the natal part of fortune. And it's not natal, actually. This is the Tesla first date of trade chart. So it's a little different than it's not the incorporation chart, right? It's just the first date that Tesla went live trading. And I actually just have it positioned at 9:30 in the morning because that's when the markets opened in 2010 over New York. And I find a lot of accuracy using charts that way. So that has me kind of keeping an eye on Tesla right now, actually, too. And I'm not going to deep dive on that right now. But if you're interested in learning more about this kind of stuff, definitely come join the Discord. Or I'm on Patreon, too. Discord, I have a lot more information in there, but you can find me either place. So, all right, let's do some astro mapping.
The one thing that was interesting to me about the Tesla chart, just, from a geo perspective, look at that Saturn-Neptune conjunction was right on the natal Uranus, and then also has started to move on to the natal Jupiter.
Yeah.
And so you could see this as, it's way down from its highs in December, that this could be a temporary low with the part of fortune showing an increase in the future, especially because that new moon is applying towards, it's not separating towards the part of fortune. And that's interesting when you think about it that way.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, just since we've gone ahead and talked about it, we may as well just flash the chart up real quick just for fun. Let me take off some of these other indicators. And I'm just, the chart
Because,
pattern that I'm watching right now is a potential cup and handle here.
yep.
So that is definitely interesting to me. As long as we hold this low here at 382.78, this is definitely a cup and handle that's alive and well. So,
Fascinating.
yep, keeping an eye. Keeping an eye.
Very cool.
All right.
Well,
Do
I'll
you
go
want
ahead and share my chart.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, let's see, where is it going through? As I talked about, I tend to use the whole sign system. And so we're having a collect. There we go. Classic Mercury retrograde. But you can see the chart. And I actually misspoke earlier. In the whole sign system, all of the Pisces is also in the sixth house. But here's what's really interesting is you have Pluto in the whole sign system in the fifth house, which could mean, some really dangerous or challenging moments for traders and speculation in that moment. And, in whole sign system, it's really important to look at the classical chart ruler. So here Venus is in the seventh house. So maybe there is something to be said here for sellers. But then I think of Venus not only being in its detriment in Aries, but it just separated from a restrictive conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. So
I've definitely tracked the Venus in Aries it can be a period of weakness in the U.S.
yeah,
equity markets for sure. What's interesting though is my friend Marcelio from X does a lot of really interesting Astro research on it, and he publishes his data on Tableau. And one of the things he talked about recently is Mars in Aries is actually incredibly favorable for the U.S. equity markets, and that's not yet, but it's coming.
It's the next new moon. I almost want to preview the next new moon, but we'd probably get ahead of ourselves. I also love that Jupiter's in the 10th house here in the whole sign system, because that is really symbolic of what I think is a lot of grift or at least insider trading happening right now. There's also the south node in the 12th house, and there's, some very credible ideas or rumors that a big part of this is getting the petrodollar stronger. And a big part of the Iran conflict is getting the petrodollar stronger. Same with the Venezuela. So anyway, those are some whole sign. We're not here to debate the housing system. I just find they're both useful to look at in their own ways.
I totally agree with you. I love taking a look at things from different perspectives. I mean, not on a new moon chart necessarily, but I also love looking at things from the heliocentric perspective too.
Yeah.
Because I think there's something to be gleaned from each different system. I don't think it's a matter of one or the other,
So can you see the map now, Margo? Because again, Mercury retrograde, I don't know if it's
I did
coming
see the
through.
map, but now it's gone.
Okay, so there it is.
Yep, there it is. Yep.
So what I want to show people, this is the map of the new moon. And remember, these maps just show where the planets are on the angles. The ascendant, which is identity, how you move through the world. It can also be the identity of a country, nation. The roots, the foundation of the IC line. The other people, open enemies of the DC line. It can also be the people. And then the MC line is really like public perception. I tend to see the most news presented there, which is really interesting. And so this is the exact new moon chart. And you see Pluto straight through the region on the AC, on the ascendant line. You also have Uranus here on the IC line, which is the roots, the foundations. And they're actually making a square right here over Syria, which is really fascinating because the IC and DC square each other, or sorry, AC and IC square each other. And this has an influence of several hundred miles. So it's this whole region being influenced. And even though it's not right over Iraq, there was news today about a helicopter crash there that killed at least 7 US soldiers. So lots happening here. This Pluto line will have an influence for the whole region. But watch this. So remember how we talked about in the
real
earlier
quick,
part?
you know what jumps out at me?
Yes, please.
Is that you've got that north node, is that north node Uranus? Right over Dubai. That
It's
just jumped out at me.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Let's zoom in there. It's actually North Node, Mercury, and Vesta.
Oh, yep, that's incredible. Well, that's interesting because they've already been a target, in this war. So it would be interesting to look at their natal chart. I don't have that handy, but
Well, it's you were just about to you read my mind of where I wanted to go next because over the weekend we have Mars and Mercury conjunct and they're on the MC line, the midheaven line, moving over this whole region over the weekend.
wow.
And so that to me is really fascinating. It's no longer on Dubai, but you can literally watch the planets move over the course of a few days. So this is on March 15th when it happens. But by the time we get to the new moon, they're now still nearby, but separating and closer to this region. Also, it's fascinating here. The Vesta line, I work a lot with the asteroid goddesses, and Vesta has a lot to do with investments. It can be a
Hmm.
financial asteroid for sure. And so part of the way I interpret this is that in the middle of Dubai being targeted with that Mercury line right there, like the eyesight of Mercury, there's also money to be made in the middle of this. And that's the complex, paradoxical, strange part of this all.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very interesting. Huh. Well, there's definitely tons of money to be. I mean, arguably, you could say that almost everything is about money at the end of the day when it comes to war,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And resources, money and resources,
Uh-huh.
they're all intimately linked.
And one of the concerns people are having with this is that there is going to be a widening global conflict. And so another astro mapping that gave me concern is Uranus, again, shocks,
Mm-hmm.
surprises,
Oh, wow.
is
Right
going
there on
straight through
Taiwan.
Taiwan with
Oh,
Pluto nearby in mainland PRC.
huh. Yep.
So this is a slower moving planet, so it's not something that we want to hang our hat on, but quite interesting. And then if we come over to the US, this is the part that I found most fascinating was Chiron going straight through DC.
Oh,
So there's something painful, challenging. It's like the evergreen wound of war in the Middle East. It drains the coffers,
yeah, or just war in general,
war in
I
general.
mean,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
and oh, you know what? So that makes me think of is interestingly enough, the New York Stock Exchange has Chiron on the ascendant,
Mm,
1 degree orb,
hmm.
right? So that's super interesting that is also just landing right over Washington D.C. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's on the DC line of the new moon chart, pretty close to New York. And right, I mean, this is so close in an astro mapping context that it will be really interesting. It's 45 miles away. So that will be interesting to see. Also, Chiron does sometimes in astro mapping have potential violence.
yeah,
So that is definitely cause for concern. You continue to see Saturn, Neptune going through the heart of the country, kind of separating it, at least metaphorically. And then here's a really fascinating final one that I wanted to point out, and please interrupt me at any time, but we have Venus, which is the planet of peace, going straight through Spain. And
huh.
the government, at least the legislature, has been one of the most vocal advocates against this war and not wanting to send, ships and military equipment to support the U.S. on this war.
That's fascinating. I love
Hmm.
that. That's really incredible. Hmm.
So it is definitely a tense time. You see
Yeah.
the Mars straight through this part of the world. The North Node in astromapping is always an amplification point. It's literally like the plus sign of a battery that you can feel right away. So fascinating to see there.
That is fascinating. Thinking about the nodes and the new moon, it also, and not to detract from the astro mapping, but what it just made me think of was one of the things that we were discussing before we started, which is the connection to the Metonic cycle of the moon
Yes,
and the eclipses that were happening during 2007. Um, do you want to show that on your chart?
or I can pull it, pass it over to you because you have some more of the charts there. So why don't I stop sharing?
I feel like let's see, maybe.
Do you want to look at the exact charts of the different
Yeah,
eclipses?
yeah. Well, I was thinking that you
Yeah.
had that
So,
really nice list of the
mm-hmm,
eclipses,
mm-hmm.
because I didn't prep but the 2007 eclipse. But what I'll do is explain while you get that chart ready, that what the Metonic cycle is. And I've actually made a YouTube video about this because when I first discovered the Metonic cycle of the moon and started researching it on the financial markets, I actually discovered that there's a 95-year cycle correlated to the Metonic cycle of the moon, that helps me build analogues in the financial market. With an extreme amount of precision. But essentially, the Metonic cycle of the moon is a 19-year cycle where the moon will appear in the sky on the same calendar day, usually within just a few hours of where it was 19 years ago, if that isn't just amazing.
It's incredible. And
So,
you're probably going to have to zoom in if you're watching the screen here, but you can see on September 22nd, 2006, there was an eclipse at 29° Virgo. And last September, it was also an eclipse at 29 Virgo. And then there was in March 3rd, 2007, a 12° Virgo eclipse, which is what we just had, 10 days ago from the recording. Here's the interesting part, though, which is what I think really hammers home the importance of this new moon, is that on March 19th, again, it can be off by a couple hours. So it was March 19th, not 18th, but you had a new moon eclipse, a solar eclipse at 28 degrees Pisces. And that's the exact degree of this new moon on March 18th this week. And so even though it's not an eclipse because the nodes shift and the, exact eclipse point is different, the moon is going to be in the same point
yeah.
as it was in March 2007. And so I think we want to look back to 2007 and see what was happening during that time that was similar. And a lot of people have been drawing conclusions or analogs to the markets then. That's why I thought maybe you
Yeah.
had that pulled up.
Oh,
But
yeah. I can share some 2007 stock charts. I have those prepped for sure.
what I definitely wanted to point out, though, the idea that the September 22nd eclipse was almost conjunct Saturn in Virgo. And this past year, it was opposite almost to the degree of Saturn in Pisces. And it really was September 2006 that we saw some major warning signs of the housing bubble, of the debt crisis, of all the financial issues that led to the 2007, 2008, 2009 Great Recession. And if you look back to September 2025, this past one, you started to see some of that. In fact, on the exact day of the solar eclipse was a huge $1.5 billion liquidation of leveraged Bitcoin. There was a few other pieces of news that came out. Do you remember we were talking about this, Margo? That was when that big news came out of trillions of dollars of treasuries in the Cayman Islands under a name that people are not sure who it belongs to, and just the leverage in the system that that's creating. So really
It's
fascinating to think about the connections here.
It is fascinating to think about the connections here. And here, I'll go ahead and grab the screen share for just a second and I'll share the 2007 stock charts so this is the Dow Jones and we'll just go back to 2007. And, I've spent quite a bit of time studying the 2007 market, but what really stands out to me, if you kind of look at where we are in 2007, is we would be back here, right?
Yep.
The week of March 13th. So, and this is this is a singular Metonic cycle. So 19-year Metonic cycle. And I will share that what my research has yielded is that the sweet spot is 5 Metonic cycles is where is where the financial market repeats. So, but it's very fascinating still to look at this. I don't use this as a direct analog, but it is a really fascinating thing to take a look and see that here we are on the Dow. And, we're just a few weeks off. We're still coming down here, right? And we got a recovery next week. If it were to track the way it did in 2007. In 2007, the recovery started next week, right? So that's certainly a possibility and an echo, if you will, in the markets to keep an eye on, But it's worth noting that the markets did continue up and we did get on the Dow, we got a double top. On the NASDAQ, we actually just continued straight up into October 29th of 2007. So, the fractures are there. We're definitely in the final stages of a long-term cycle, right?
Yeah.
And you can track those from planetary cycles. You can track them in traditional time cycles. I mean, there's a book by Philip J. Anderson called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking, or The Secret History of Real Estate and Banking. And he just tracks it purely on calendar year cycles correlated to the real estate cycle from the beginning of, 1776. And so there's just a myriad of ways that you can track these things. But at the end of the day, the reality is we are in the late stage of a long-term cycle. And so it is worth trading with caution right now. I absolutely think that, and if you're not an experienced trader or investor, it's really a good time to just focus on education, But yeah,
like your one analog that showed the 2018 analog, which is a separate concept than this, really showed how choppy this year could be up and down.
Definitely.
I wanted to point out one thing. Guess what March 2007 was? That was when Bear Stearns went under.
March of 2007. And right now we've got the BlackRock, Blackstone, Blue Owl, right? I think it was a blue owl. Different colored animals and stones going down.
I do think looking back, it's interesting because usually one financial crisis is not similar to the next, but there's astrology to suggest there could be a lot of repeating patterns, thematically at least, if not structurally, with that year.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is that 2018 that I was talking about, because I run and measured various different cycles, and I share those in my Discord. But one of the cycles that we're in is a pattern from 2018. And so I kind of kicked this year off by saying I think that it's going to be a trader's market. That doesn't mean it's going to run exactly tick for tick like this. But we can look at the price action that we saw in 2018, and we can expect to see some similar type of choppy price behavior.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Margo.
Cool. Let's see. I think I ran through all the charts. The only thing I didn't run through, if we want to double back real quick before we wrap up on Iran, on the Iran and Israel conflict, is that I noticed I had the chart from the first strike when all of this conflict began in 2024. Let's see. Not that one. That's Iran natal. Uh-oh, perhaps I Mercury retrograded it.
Look at the Iran natal chart, because I think that there's some really interesting points there.
Well, I have it here, but yes, let's definitely look at the Iran natal chart, because this is the new moon on the Iran natal chart, and it's landing almost exactly on natal Mercury. They have a natal Mercury Mars conjunction
with Mercury retrograde during that conjunction,
and Vesta
in Pisces.
and Vesta. I didn't even notice that until we're talking about all this. Wow.
It's going to be activated this weekend big time.
Wow. And it's so interesting that's in the 7th house, right? So open enemies and partnerships too, right? And I mean, it's interesting to think about the context of a war, and it's not a partnership in the positive sense, but it does in the end end up being, a partnership of sorts, I guess, because one country overtakes another typically, right? Yep. So there is an enormous amount of deep interpersonal interaction going on. So that is fascinating. And is that even possible? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Let me make sure I have
Yes, I cannot believe that. Wow.
That's unbelievable. Look, the part of fortune is going to be conjunct by 1 degree, the Iran's part of fortune. Now, of course, the 3:00 time for the Iran natal chart could be debated by someone, but I actually dug this up, and I don't remember exactly where at this point. I've had this chart for a little while, but there's a reason it's set at 3:00.
I remember it was when it was announced on the radio, the new administration.
Okay, there you go.
And so another chart some people use is when the first supreme leader was elected behind closed doors. But I like this chart because it was the public announcement on the radio, and it's very thematically appropriate. You have the sun in the 8th house, which means that they can often be isolated from the world order and at least they're in a hidden house. It's probably not as isolating as the 12th house, but in the whole sign system, they have Jupiter in the 12th house. What is that fixed star in the 12th house you have over there?
Well, that's actually an asteroid. And so that's Bitcoin's asteroid, Satoshi.
Okay, never mind.
Um,
But how
but
about the fact that they have the exact same ascendant degree as President Trump? I mean, it's just
oh, that's wild. And
the
well,
universe is glitching.
and Jupiter is about to transit
Yeah.
over natal
Yeah.
Iran Jupiter. That's fascinating. That's going to be an interesting set of transits when that happens, and then that'll be trine to the natal Mars Mercury situation going on over here in the 7th. Yeah, definitely. Iran's got a ton of activation right now.
Will you go back to the part of fortune? Because Margo and I are literally just doing this live,
Yeah.
which I hope is fun. But I have had this feeling that they are being underestimated and they could have some sympathy if the US goes heavy handed. With the part of fortune there, the Jupiter return coming up, and this return, what is this, the recurrence transit of Mars Mercury, this could be a really significant pivot.
It
Really
really could be.
significant.
And, I mean, I have to say, we have to acknowledge that this is Uranus coming off of a conjunction with Algol. And
Right.
I have to comment on this. This is fixed star Alcyone. And fixed star Alcyone is connected to sight. It could be spiritual sight. It could be quite literal, your eyesight, and blindness. Right. So it's in its positive, it's spiritual sight or foresight. In its shadow, it's blindness. And so interesting that this is really part of our yod here, right? It's in orb of Alcyone. And it's a little bit of a wide orb. It's a 5-degree orb, so I'll count it. But there's potentially something we're not seeing here pertaining to this. And that's Algol there. Yeah, that's interesting that Iran also has Algol on the midheaven.
Incredible.
Fascinating. And for anyone who doesn't know, fixed star Algol is correlated to losing your head because it aligns with the mythological story of Medusa and Perseus. So
Yeah, it's not to be messed with.
no.
You could show that other chart about the 2024 attack because that is also metaphorically fascinating.
Yep. So here it is. So, actually, you know what? I think this is classic Mercury retrograde. I had it up. Love it. Okay.
One more week, we can get through it.
Oh, we'll make it. I'm sure of it. So here's the new moon on the first strike chart. But the new moon is interesting because it's landing on the first strikes, Venus, Neptune here. But what actually caught my attention was this Mars at 7 degrees Pisces. And Mars is right now, as we're speaking, headed, is it just over maybe? Or it just passed? It's either just about to, hold on.
It just passed because, it's about to conjoin Mercury at 10 degrees.
Oh, at
this
10 degrees.
weekend.
That's right. So it just passed over. So we just had the Mars return for the first strike when this whole conflict really
Incredible.
broke out, right?
Incredible.
Yeah, very incredible. And then you've got the part of fortune from the first strike sitting at 8 degrees Gemini. And that's interesting. I mean, I guess Uranus is so slow moving, we won't get there anytime soon.
Yeah.
But notable that it's sitting on the midheaven. And of course, square then to the Saturn Neptune.
Yep.
Fascinating. No, Saturn Mars.
Incredible.
Mars,
Well,
Saturn.
we definitely can say that this war and possibly escalation this weekend is going to have an impact on the markets next week, which every non-astrologer is saying. So when the astrology backs it up, it always makes me realize there's some truth in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Well, I think we should try to wrap up on a slightly more positive tone. I thought that something that I wanted to share that I really found profound was looking at the Sabian symbols we could look at the one for the new moon, which I thought was pretty poignant. But really what caught my eye was the 8.5 degree Mercury node conjunction. So Sabian symbols are, Mark Edmund Jones kind of channeled a system where he gave almost like a download and a keyword and an interpretation for each degree of the zodiac. And so I love the precision of it. And that the Sabian symbol for the location of Mercury and the North Node is the keyword is practice. When positive, the degree is a spectacular gift for rising to any occasion. And when
Wow.
negative, witless gambling of every resource and potentiality.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that fascinating with the
Wow.
yod?
The
And then
duality.
just because of the energy of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
the Sabian symbol for the new moon itself, the keyword is validation. When positive,
Incredible.
the degree is exceptional accomplishment through judgment of unusual accuracy. And when negative, it's it's fortuitous pride of the intellect. So,
Amazing.
and an incredible way for us to to lead the way is stay focused on your practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
You know,
yep.
I'm going to add my part. We forgot to talk about the human design connection here because it's similarly optimistic. It's gate 25, which starts the whole system because interestingly, human design, or it starts the whole astrological system. Gate 25 begins at 28 degrees and 15 minutes of Pisces. So it's
Wow.
basically the anaretic degree and then half of the 28th degree or a little bit more. And so this new moon is right after that gate starts. And it has a lot of the energy you would expect of zero Aries. And it's about a 5.5 degree period. And if you don't know what the gates are, human design is a modality that combines Western astrology and Eastern astrology and the I Ching and all sorts of different modalities. And each gate represents a theme of the I Ching as interpreted by the founder of human design. And so gate 25 is about innocence, fresh starts, ignition, all of those keywords, Margo, that you used in your Saturn Neptune analysis also apply here. And how fascinating that we bleed into the equinox, that 0 degrees Aries point, 2 days later on March 20th. So this new moon has that. And one of my favorite things, which is such an Aries theme, but part of this gate is truth. And imagine having truth and clarity in the middle of this Mercury retrograde. You and I, with our Virgo placements, wouldn't we love that?
Absolutely. I think, and that theme of truth shows up from multiple different angles. I also think
Yes.
of Pluto in Aquarius as the harbinger of truth, if you will. Pluto won't stand for anything but the truth, right? Yeah, the Saturn Neptune conjunction right there within orb of the new moon, it is a really big deal because it's like we're getting the acute activation from the quicker moving luminaries
Yeah.
of the Saturn Neptune conjunction that just took place in late February, right? Like that's the long running moment that's began the official next cycle. And now we're going to get all of this interplanetary activation, right? Because first we got Venus over it. Now we're going to get the luminaries. We're going to get Mercury and Mars. Everybody is going to join the party. I kind of look at it like it's almost like a walking through a threshold,
Right.
like a rebirth into the new cycle. Each planet gets to kind of push through it,
Right. Yeah. It's going to be a rebirth for sure.
Yeah. Well, all right. This has been
That
great.
was a great idea. I'm glad we ended on the Sabian symbol and gate because that does provide some optimism. I know it's such a tough time right now. Reading the news requires a lot of filtering, I feel like you have to meditate before and after you read the news these days,
I totally agree with you. I
Yeah.
don't do a lot of scrolling social media. Twitter is my preferred platform. If you don't follow me there, you can find me there at Margo Amala, at Margo_Amala. Don't be fooled by the imposters. But yeah, I was really overwhelmed actually. And I was like, I can't even look at the feed right now because there is a lot of fear in the world. And of course, then all that fear, as I feel it kind of creep into myself and then, being a forecaster of the markets, and then I start to doubt myself a little bit. And then what I thought to myself is that right there, we're getting real close to buy the dip opportunity. Right?
If you're scared that you're wrong, then
creeps
yes.
in, that's the time you're getting close. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great thought to end on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me again, Margo. It's so fun to do these with you.
Yeah. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yep, I'm on almost every platform, Substack, Patreon, X, Choose Your Poison, The Weekly Stars, all one word.
That's awesome. And, you know, you can find me also on X at Margo_Amala. I offer personalized astrology readings through my website, margoamala.com. And you can sign up for my Discord. The link will be in the video description below. And last but not least, if you found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn your bell notifications on so you don't miss us next time. All right. Talk to you later.
I agree. Ciao. Bye.